Okay.
So, hello everyone. Welcome to Coach to Transformation CCU webinar. I'm your host Chaitanya. Today we are joined by Chris, an ICF professional certified coach with over 13 years of coaching experience and nearly a decade running his own coaching practice. Chris works across leadership levels from C-suite team leaders to middle management teams and individuals and has partnered with organizations ranging from Fortune 100 companies to local enterprises. He also lectures in coaching, psychology, and coaching practices at the university level and is on faculty for multiple coach training organizations. And he also serves on the board of Samaritans of Singapore, where he is actively involved in governance and suicide prevention work. In today's session, Chris will explore his passion for intersection of ancient wisdom and contemporary knowledge, focusing on Enneagram and its application in coaching. The session will be interactive, and we also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end. So we're delighted to have you here today, Chris. Over to you.
Thank you. Let me just share my screen. Right. Okay. Thanks for that introduction. I'm not sure I can live up to all. If you can be on mute, that would be great. Um, Thanks for the introduction. I'm not sure I can quite live up to everything that you promised, but I'll do my very best. One thing I'll say up front is that the slides are very content heavy. Okay, so there's a ton of content in here. I'm not going to read every single line. Don't panic. The purpose of having content heavy slides is so that at the end of the day, CTT can share them out to everybody that's on the call, and you've then got that as a reference deck as much as anything else. My contact details are at the back of the deck as well. So if you ever want to reach out and have a chat about Enneagram or anything, feel free. We've got a lot to get through, so I'm going to jump straight in. The invitation is that if you've got any questions, you can either hold them to the end, as Justin said, or we'll take them as we go. Just use the notifications tool on Zoom, and the little hand will go up, and we'll be able to take your question. Okay, right. So let's start at the very basics. What is the Enneagram? Very simply, it's a psychological and personality model based very squarely on that sort of deep human psychology. And the premise behind it is that everybody has got a very unique personality structure. And that personality structure is very much how they see the world, how they see themselves, how they interact, and how they engage with other people. The literal definition is 9 figures, as you can see there. And the symbol itself is composed of a circle, which has got 9 numbered points around the outside edge. Each of those numbers represents a worldview, an archetype, if you like, and that corresponds to the core instincts that an individual carries, how they think, how they feel, how they act, how they show up, and how they behave in relation to the world overall. Now, instincts is a really important thing. In a lot of cases, we are talking about instincts rather than patterns of behavior, because the patterns of behavior are informed by socialization, conditioning, education, or a host of other environmental factors, external factors, that then shape some of your patterns of behavior and culture as well. But we're interested in the base instincts. So in that sense, it's not just a tool for understanding ourselves and others, but also, and what's one of the real purposes of today is just to unpack it a little bit as a tool for growth, self-awareness, self-discovery, and beginning to build on those instincts, motivations, and see how they shift into patterns of behavior. Now, the important thing here is it's not about labeling. Quite the reverse. We're not boxing people in. We're not allocating a label and sticking it on them. It should be liberating. It should be freeing. It should be an open systems perspective more than anything else. It's got a very long history. If you go back and read Homer's Odyssey, which is 800 BC, he talks about going on a journey. And we as coaches talk to our clients about going on a journey and being on a journey through life. But Homer talks about his journey around the world back in 800 BC, visiting 9 separate countries, observing 9 separate types of individuals and profiles in each of those countries. So right from the very early days, there's a whole range of different influences right the way through to modern times. But realistically, 600, 800 BC is where it starts. Since then, Greek philosophy has got involved, Christianity has been involved, medieval philosophy has even been involved in the 1300s, and then slightly more recently, Sufism, some of the oral traditions of Sufism are built into the Enneagram work as we know it today. More recently, in the last sort of 50, 60 years, we've seen 2 particular figures come to the fore. And these are really the kind of like the founding fathers of the modern Enneagram. Oscar Isherzo and Claudio Naranjano, they're both coming through from the 60s and 70s. Claudio was actually a student of Oscar, but they were one of the first people to realistically start to look at the Enneagram as a personality profiling tool and a system that could be applied on a very broad scale. And my screen has just decided to freeze. Okay, not a worry. Moving forward into contemporary times, people like Helen Palmer, Ross Hudson, they're really the people that popularized it most during the 80s and 90s. They're the founders of the Enneagram Institute, which is probably one of the largest institutes that focuses on the Enneagram, and we'll talk a little bit more about those in a minute. And they've made it much more accessible and to the public, and started to produce a system that was more understandable to the public rather than something that was perhaps a little more psychologically based and professionally oriented. And then in the current world, we're seeing more and more, we're seeing a lot of corporates leaning into the Enneagram, and we'll come back to that in a second. They're starting to see it as a very powerful tool for building awareness, starting to see it as a powerful tool for understanding human behavior, not just as an individual, but also looking at teams, organizations in the workplace, as well as outside of that. So it's starting to gain a lot more traction as a business coaching and a leadership tool as well. I think two kind of main platforms dominate now, but there's a lot of other platforms, but these are probably 2 of the major ones. The first one is by the Enneagram Institute, which is they do the RETI test. And then the second one is a platform called IEQ9. We'll just take a couple of minutes to have a look at each of those, because I think there's something that starts to really unpack the Enneagram and starts to build it out a little bit more in terms of what's its capability, what's its strength, how can it be applied more as a coaching tool. So in terms of the Enneagram Institute, this is something that was, as I said, the Enneagram Institute was created mid-1990s by Riso and Hudson. The test itself is 144 paired statements. It's an online test, but it's a forced choice format. So it's yes or no, it's black or it's white, but it's a forced choice format. And the intention is that it will identify quite a basic personality type. The focus is around one of the 9 types that will be dominating your personality. And that's the premise that is underpinning this particular test. It makes it very simple as a test, and it makes it very simple in terms of decoding it and understanding it for the layman, probably more so than coaches. But it's a good tool, it's an accurate tool, it's quite quick, and it does give you what your primary type is. The only thing I'd say about it is that if you, from a coaching point of view, if you want to use it more aggressively, more dynamically, and work at greater depth with your clients, then you're going to need to do an awful lot more reading around the subject and looking at depth into some of the topics that come out of the Enneagram Institute report. IEQ9. Now I have to be honest and say this is my preferred platform, and so I apologize if there's any evidence of bias or subjectivity here, but it's a platform that I've used literally a few hundred times now, so I have a lot of belief in it.
Listening to a webinar and joined a webinar, coaching webinar.
Anybody can join me, it's okay, we don't mind. So this is one that I use a lot, and for me, it genuinely does offer an unparalleled depth of insight. This is very much instinct based. It digs very, very deep into a whole range of different psychodynamics. It covers off the sustainable development. It covers off limiting beliefs. It covers off personality, instinct, motivations. Then it also digs down into some of the other areas like stress and strain and something called the centers of expression. And then in the teams area, it looks at communication, conflict, leadership, decision making, and so on. So there's a very broad range of dynamics that it covers off. But in each of those, it also offers the opportunity to go to significant depth. I'm very glad to hear that, Kathleen. It's great to have a kindred spirit on the line. Thank you for popping that in the chat. And I just genuinely believe that it offers incredible diagnosis and development opportunities, identifying the patterns, looking at beginning to build out journeys that unfold, and they slowly deepen and they slowly work level after level after level, starting to get into more subtle and more powerful pathways where you can unpack the awareness, the understanding, and drive development. It's not just me that believes in it, and Kathleen. It's also getting an increasing amount of traction amongst a very high percentage of the Fortune 500 companies. This is just some of them here, just so the names that you'll recognize on a global level. But it's a platform that has got a lot of merit. Now, as a platform, they claim 95% accuracy. In my personal experience, I would say, having worked with this platform across a couple of hundred clients, I would absolutely agree with that level of accuracy, which is pretty impressive overall. The benefits, I'm not going to go through these line by line. As I say, the charts you'll have at the end of the day, so you can read these in your depending on the context that you're looking at, whether it's from an individual coaching client, whether it's a teams client, or whether it's more in the organizational space. There's a big range of benefits that are tucked away into IEQ9. Now, so that's a little bit of background. What I'm going to do now is just fairly quickly go into the actual content of the Enneagram and start by looking at the 9 separate types. Here again, I'm not going to go into great detail, and the clock is ticking and running against us. But as you'll see, there's enough information here for you to get your teeth into. And when we get into the types after this next chart, you'll see in the top right-hand corner, there's a link. That link takes you to a YouTube video, in fact, by Russ Hudson from the Enneagram Institute, who explains in much greater detail the individual types and the characteristics and traits and patterns that go with those types. Now, whilst we have one model, the Enneagram model overall, different organizations use different descriptors for each of those 9 types, but they're all they're all kind of in the same space. So if we look at type 1, we've got the reformer, we've got strict perfectionist, we've got moral perfectionist, we've got, what else have we got? The meticulous judge. So they're all in the similar space. Somebody that is very perfection focused, they're very strict, they're very rigorous, they're very well defined. So lots of different personas and archetypes are used, but ultimately the description of those is pretty common across all of the models. And that's what we'll look at now. So the first one, which is type 1, is known as the strict perfectionist or moral perfectionist, meticulous judge, etc. These people they're all about self-improvement. They're all about something having to be right, something that's got to be done correctly. And they've got a very clear, very linear, almost black and white sense of right and wrong. And because of that, sometimes they can appear just a little bit idealistic or judgmental, but they value facts, precision, clarity. There's this linearity behind it. And from their point of view, the world is imperfect, and their challenge is that they have to work towards improving it. That's their purpose in life, is to improve it. They've got to be good, they've got to be right, they've got to be perfect, and they must actively distinguish between right and wrong and work really hard to lift the world and make it better. Principled, objective, conscientious, structured, and quality-minded are characteristics. The downside of a 1, or one of the downsides at least, is that yes, Faria, the slides will be shared later. Absolutely, no question at all. That's not a problem. Oh, thank you. A heart. The downside of a 1 is that their definition of right is what matters. So when something's got to be perfect, when something's got to be right, when something's got to be done correctly, it's done their way. Doesn't matter whatever anybody else thinks, it's their way that is right, and it's their way that matters. So there's a little bit of a dark side to the 1, but there's a dark side to or shadow to all of the types. Type 2, considerate helper, nurturing advisor, giver. And these are people that are driven to be helpful. They're strong, warm, giving, people-oriented, very supportive people. They can be sensitive, arguably oversensitive, and sometimes if they feel unappreciated, there's a little bit of anger creeps into the mix. And that's one of the cues and clues behind a 2, is there's sometimes a little bit of a motivation as to why they are so helpful, why they are so supportive, because they want to be loved back in return. And that's the self-talk that surfaces, that people depend on me for help. I must earn the love and appreciation of others by being there for them. I am only worthwhile if I am liked and needed, and I deserve love because I am loving. So you start to see the little bit of a shadow there in terms of the motivation for giving sometimes can be a little more manipulative. But in general, warm, giving, people-centered, sacrificing, and very praising and outward and positive individuals. The 3, competitive achievers, these people are doers. They make stuff happen. They're very practical, task-oriented. They really have got that competitive edge. They're prepared to make sacrifices in order to achieve goals. They can, the shadow here is that they can be workaholics. They can become, they can lead to being overstretched or overwhelmed. So there's a little bit of an edge to that there. But the self-talk is purely around success. I must succeed at all costs. The world values winners. I've got to avoid failure. I am what I do, and to earn my place, I must be the best at what I do. Ambitious, efficient, adaptable, driven, results oriented. So quite a strong, powerful character. We see the 1 and the 3 quite frequently in leadership positions around the world. 4 is actually a relatively rare type. We don't see a lot of type 4s. And this is somebody that's quite an intense, individualistic, and very sensitive, but they're working at depth. There was a huge amount of meaning and authenticity tucked away. But as a result, sometimes they can be a little bit emotional, moody, dramatic, and perhaps a little bit negative. They focus on what is lacking in their lives rather than what is in their lives. So trying to pull that apart is always a challenge from a coaching point of view. Their self-talk is around the fact that something's missing, and they're on this quest, this drive to find what it is that they're missing in their life. And they've got to stay true to their purpose and express their authentic self. So there's something that they're really purpose driven. They're quite self-aware, inspired, and they also don't shy away from some of the more painful aspects of the emotional space. They're quite comfortable working at significant depth if you choose to take them there. Quiet specialists, they have a very definite role to play in corporate, and they're really deep divers. They've got to go to great depth. They've got to know a subject, a topic, the reason why at the greatest level they can possibly can. They'll spend hours and hours researching. These are the guys that if you walk into an office and you're walking around the office, you'll see some people sat there with their headphones on, head down, just working. Those are the kind of guys we're talking about. They've got a very, very active mental life, but they're always observing and exploring and looking and thinking and processing. So there's a huge amount of mental energy going on, and that's internalized rather than externalized. So they sometimes come across as a little bit socially awkward, a little bit disinterested. But if you challenge them on that, they might be quite defensive about where they are. But they see the world as intrusive, and they try to protect their resources and their energy so that they can think. And they're trying to be self-sufficient. They're trying to not depend on others. They're trying to get to make sense of the world as much as they possibly can. They're curious, they're self-sufficient, they're inventive, and a little bit unsentimental. They approach life and kind of push emotions to one side, and they don't get too drawn into that space. Loyal skeptic. I happen to live with a loyal skeptic as my wife, and she's quite extreme. But this is all about risk. The world is not a safe space. They're very, very sensitive to danger. They're very, very sensitive to risk. They make great insurance brokers. But they're always acting on that sense of anxiety. That's what drives them. They're always thinking in that skeptical way. They're looking for belonging. They're looking to be safe. At the lower end of integration, a little bit of paranoia and insecurity creeps in, but they can become self-reliant, grounded, and they're very resilient types. But overall, the world is not a safe place. They've got to be prepared. People can count on me. You've got to be careful who you trust. So there's a little bit of fear in there in terms of you can't let my guard down. I've got to protect myself. But that's the way 6 show up. A lot of preparedness. So again, from a corporate point of view, a lot of value there in a team orientation, courage, resilience, and strength. 7, sometimes talked about as a monkey mind. Somebody that is quite sort of scattered in some ways and does a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and they're always on the move. They like variety, they like stimulation, they like fun, they like this creativity, the energy, the optimism. And as a result, sometimes that comes across as them being very distracted, unfocused, almost irresponsible in some ways, uncaring. When you dig deeper in a coaching scenario, trying to get behind what's driving them, what are they afraid of that keeps them moving, they will often deny that they are escaping into that hyperactivity. But the positive phrasing of it is that the world is full of exciting possibilities. They've got to experience it all. I'm okay, I deserve what I want, and I'm going to move forward. I must have my freedom. That I'm okay bit, from a coaching point of view, is something that's always worth exploring and digging deeper, because usually there's an underlying fear. There's a reason for the avoidance. There's a reason why they don't like to stop and go a little bit deeper. But in general, optimistic, flexible, future-oriented, and very practical people as well. Last but one, eighths, again, very strong in the leadership space. These are really powerful people that take control. They value control. Their presence and their personality is powerful. They hide their vulnerability. They're tough. They're no nonsense. They're very direct. But they can also have a compassionate edge to them as well. But this is very much about controlling things as tightly as possible, making sure that everything is locked down and everything is done. Quite often you'll see this, an 8 in parallel with a 3 or a 1 as well. Similar characteristics, similar traits, and in corporate settings, they appear quite often together. Assertive, decisive, protective, very independent people, very strong in terms of leadership and direction, and they trust their gut instincts and move forward very strongly and very quickly. Finally, the 9, peacemaker, facilitates, mediates, is friendly, grounded, very stable. But the challenge here is a lack of boundaries at the end of the day. And as long as other people around them are okay, then 9s are okay too. The world would be a better place if everybody could treat each other with respect. Got to keep the peace, be tolerant, be accepting, just be nice. And this is Mr. Nice Guy. Never going to ruffle any feathers, never going to upset anybody, avoiding conflict. So very agreeable, very understanding, patient, and supportive. So those are the types. As a high-speed review, top right-hand corner, you can see there's a link. That's sort of a 2.5 minute video, which will give you a little bit more detail on each of the types. Now, I mentioned at the start that the Enneagram Institute tend to focus on one type. And a lot of people will talk about, oh, I'm a type 6, oh, I'm a type 4, oh, I'm a type 2. And they will focus on that singular type. Now, that makes it really tough when it comes to how do you justify individuality? How do you justify unique personalities? How do you have actually 7 billion people that are all different instead of 9 types, each with nearly 1 billion people in the single type? And this is where IEQ9 in particular, and it's the only platform that I'm aware of that goes into this detail. And this is where you start to get some really, really interesting work in terms of how you leverage it and how you use it from a coaching point of view. So what you get from IEQ9 is something like this. So the basic premise is that everybody is a mix of all 9 types, different levels, different amounts, different quantities of this resource, different quantities, different awareness of these instincts. So remember, these are instincts, not necessarily patterns of behavior. But everybody is a mix of all 9 types. Now, the simplest way of trying to unpack that a little bit is if you think about a wardrobe with just 9 sets of clothes in it, only nine, but they're all different. There's your gym wear, there's your day-to-day office wear, there's your, I've got an important meeting with the CEO, so I better look smart today wear. There's your hang around the house on a Sunday afternoon and kick the cat wear. But they're all very, very different types of wardrobe. Okay, so you've got 9 different sets of clothes that you can wear. That's it. So depending on the ideal situation is that depending on the situation or the context that you're going into, you will reach into that wardrobe and choose one of those sets of clothes. You're choosing how to show up. You've got access to all 9. Some of them might be tucked away at the back of the wardrobe a little bit. So if I go back, in this case, the 8, that's a resource that might be tucked away right at the back of the wardrobe, and you have to work a little bit harder to activate it and to bring it forward and force yourself to put it on. But those 9 sets of clothes are there for you. So depending on the situation will depend on how you choose to show up. As long as you're aware that you've got that resource available to you, you can start to make intentional, conscious choices about how you show up. Now, the important thing is that what you wear when you walk into that room with the CEO, if you rock up in your gym kit or if you rock up in a power suit, how the CEO experiences you or how your friends experience you will be different. Depending on what you wear, that will influence, that will impact how they see you. It'll also change and also shape a little bit how you feel. So if you're wearing your Sunday afternoon, hang around the house and do nothing, you're going to feel relaxed and chilled and laid back and easygoing. If you've got a meeting with the CEO and you've put your suit on, you're going to feel just that a little bit sharper, a little bit punchier, you're going to feel different. So how you're experienced is different. The sensations that you feel will be different, but it's still you. It's still you inside those clothes. So all you're doing is just choosing to show up in a slightly different way, but it's still you inside that way. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. And from a coaching point of view, what we're looking to do is build awareness of all of those 9 types and help our clients understand in which situation, which set of clothes are you going to reach for, or which combination of clothes are you going to reach for, so that you can show up in a way that you are comfortable with, that you are happy with. It's still you, but how you're experienced might be slightly different. Now, there's something called centers, which we'll come on to in a second. These are centers of experience. So I'm just calling it out now, that as you can see down the side, the colors, red, green, and blue, they correspond to the colors that you see on the profile mix that IEQ9 provide. And we'll talk about centers in a second. Okay. So the reality in terms of leveraging your mix is, from a coaching point of view, is helping our clients understand and be aware of there's different ways of seeing, thinking, and doing, different possibilities, and that gives different outcomes. So putting them in control, boosting their awareness, giving them the choice, giving them those possibilities so that they can be in control of and shape the outcomes. Don't worry that you've just joined late. You haven't missed anything important. Just me talking for 30 minutes. Right, so I said we'd talk about centers. That's next. Basically, we've all got 3 centers. Now, the reality is that head, heart, and hands, or head, heart, and gut, however you want to look at it, this is one of my favorite neuroscience and neurobiology facts. We all know, as coaches, we all know, and we all work with neuroscience in terms of the connections in the brain, the synapses, the neurons, all of that connection is as a big neural network.
31st को खाएंगे.
Sorry, Neha? Okay. So there's this big neural network in your head, your brain. Nobody's going to dispute that. What science has shown us in the last 10, 12, 13 years is that there is a similar sized neural network to the brain similar sized neural network around your heart, and a similar sized neural network to the brain in your gut. Slightly smaller in your heart and your gut, but effectively you've got 3 brains that are available to us. And how you can use those will give you different perspectives on a problem. The ideal, of course, is to have it integrated, but you've got 3 different resources that you can tap into, which will give you different perspectives on a problem. Now, the reality is that 9 times out of 10, actually 99 times out of 100, the centers are stacked, not balanced. And that in itself is a great development opportunity. How can you get people to tap into their body from a somatic point of view? How can you get people to listen to their heart? How can you get people to stop overthinking and to move down deeper into their body? So there's a lot of richness just in this data point alone. So understanding how to integrate, how you can get consciously move between those 3 centers is really important. Now, there is always one dominant center. It's the one that we prefer to use, the one that we access first. It's kind of the go-to that we reach out to, almost a default operating system rather than anything else. We might not be aware of it, but it's quite often other people are, that he always overthinks or she always just goes with whatever her gut tells her. So sometimes it's just purely from a coaching point of view, starting to build awareness of that and shape how you interact with others based on that awareness. Secondary center is a support to the dominant center. It's quite often relatively close from a scoring point of view, and it's adding an enriching perspective as long as we're aware of it and as long as we allow it to. And the third center is very often neglected or suppressed. It's something that people tend to avoid. Again, I'm going to go through these very, very quickly because I'm aware of time and I want to get to the last section more than anything. Action first. Action tends to be hot energy. It's fast, it's impulsive, it's focused. People who engage very actively and energetically, decisions that tend to be quick and intuitive. These are the kind of people that you see with action first. Trying to calm them down, trying to slow them down, trying to get them to tap into, their head, just think things through rather than going with their gut action first is part of the coaching narrative here. Feeling, this is something that's really interesting as it varies enormously by culture. People being aware of their emotions and that having that emotional intelligence varies enormously across different cultures, particularly in Asia. But it's a warm energy, it's emotional, it's self-aware, it's collaborative, it's consultative, it's empathetic, receptive. So these are very positive things, and that getting that heart engaged is something that's really, really quite important. And then thinking first, it's cool, it's rational, it's everything you'd expect. The challenge is that quite often, because we're taught from an education point of view to think things through, to rely on our brains, it becomes almost an over-reliance. And we end up with something called analysis paralysis and over planning. So those are a very quick scamper through the centers. Core instincts is the next level down that we've got. So this is the next dimension where we're looking at 3 clusters of biological drivers and instincts. And as you go through these, just be processing from a coaching point of view, thinking about how different combinations of things will lead to different outcomes. So even just staying with the profile mix, if you've got somebody that is a very strong 1 and a very strong 8, so they're controlling, very controlling, and everything's got to be perfect, compared to somebody that is a very strong 1 with a very strong 6. Everything's got to be perfect because of fear. So thinking about the combinations of all of these, you've got the types, you've got the centers, and now you've got these things called instinct, which are basically clusters of biological drivers, how we relate to ourselves, how we relate to others, how we relate to our, to our environment. And they very much guide our way of being, what we believe is good for us, what we believe we need, what we believe we want. It shows up in 3 different ways. One of them is called self-preservation, which is all about safety and security. These people are very protective of their energy, their resources, the things that they've got access to, and can become quite defensive. They're very safety conscious, they're very secure, focused as much as anything. The one-on-one instinct, these are people that are very focused on quite intense relationships and experiences, but with very specific people, not with a group, not with a team, not with an organization, but it will tend to be, as the name says, a very tight, focused one-on-one interpersonal connection. So that's quite an intense, needy, and if you're one of the one-on-ones, it's a great connection. If you're not, it's hard to connect with that person and hard to engage with them. And then the social instinct is somebody that is very much focused on belonging in social groups, belonging in communities. They're very aware of status and hierarchy and awareness of group norms. They tend sometimes to be too conformist because of that group pressure. So you'll quite often then see somebody who is, say, a type 9, dominant type 9, might have a strong social instinct. So they're this peacemaker. They don't want to rock the boat. They're very aware of the group norms. They're very aware of peer group pressure. So they start to shrink more and more and more and more and more and become very small. And that's a coaching opportunity. Lines is for you to read. Stress is something that is very important as well, and something that we need to keep in mind. And again, the IQ9 gives you a very clear score in terms of how stress is showing up in your life, which clearly is a very important coaching opportunity. How are you going to manage psychological stress, anxiety? How are you going to manage stress in the workplace with vocational? How are you going to manage interpersonal stress? So understanding all of those in the context of the Enneagram instincts gives you a very clear coaching opportunity. Stress varies enormously, and it changes very quickly. So these are 3 people. These are 3 people who are actually working in the same corporate team side by side. So this is not an environmental impact. These are individuals in the same organization, in the same team, at the same management level, but with very, very different levels of stress. So you can start to see coaching opportunities, particularly on that bottom right-hand corner. So, yes, absolutely. I'm gonna be naughty. That, if I look at my wife's profile, that bottom right-hand corner, hers is all red, and that's nothing to do with me. I promise you that is not my fault. But stress levels have a massive, massive impact in terms of how you show up. We all know that as coaches, managing that stress, managing that anxiety is super important. So having access to data that points to this, coupled with the Enneagram, is really quite important. So as a coaching tool, the final mile, and thank you for staying with me. Thank you for hanging on in there. High speed, I promised you that, and it has been. The biggest thing, and I'm going to touch on 3 areas here. The biggest thing realistically that the Enneagram gives us as a coaching tool is awareness. And that helps us. It gives us a framework. It gives us data. It gives us structure to talk to our clients and boost their awareness, turn the lights on, as we quite often say from a coaching point of view, making sure if it's something that they're already aware of, how can we reinforce that? How can we build that? How can we dimensionalize that? How can we present it in slightly different perspectives so that they become aware of what they already were aware of, but in a different way? The second bucket is where they will tend to deny something and go, no, that's not, absolutely not, that's not me, and they'll challenge it, but they will eventually roll over. And they will, once you start to unpack it and discuss it, they will begin to realize that, that is actually kind of the way I show up. That's the way I behave. Those are my instincts. They'll quite often be focused on their patterns of behavior rather than their instincts. So that's a connection that as a coach, we need to make and work quite hard so that they understand what's driving them. What's that core motivation? What's the reason why behind the what that everybody sees? And then the third bucket is identifying blind spots. How can we really, really turn the lights on and go where people are absolutely convinced that this is not their way of being? How can we help them understand that this is maybe not how they think they are, but it could well be how they're being experienced by others? So awareness is a really powerful tool. And just driving that, building that, layering that, deepening that, and focusing, as I say, on the why, not just the what. Not just what are you aware of, but why is it present? Why is it important? Why is it affecting your life? What can you do about it? What are the opportunities? That's a great opportunity in the coaching space. The second level is then taking that awareness, driven by that awareness, looking at, and we talk about conversations for understanding, possibility, and action. Once you're aware of something, whether it's yourself, whether it's others, the instincts, the motivations, etc., understanding that, getting behind it, unpacking the why starts to make it more accessible, starts to make it more open, starts to make it something that you can do something about. You can choose to do something about if you want to. And that's where you then drop down into that second layer of starting, as you go through the coaching conversations, you've built the awareness, you're starting to unpack the understanding of that awareness, and then looking at the possibilities, looking at new narratives, looking at a deeper understanding, untapped resources. What's the potential for somebody? What's the opportunity? Not necessarily telling them what's right or wrong, quite the reverse. That's not what we do as coaches, but just helping them understand there are possibilities. You could be different. You could see things differently. You can show up differently. You can reach into that wardrobe and choose a different set of clothes today. But what is the potential? What is the possibility that's available to you? And then the last part of it is about having got the awareness, having got the understanding and possibilities, making conscious, intentional choices. For me, there's no greater luxury on the planet than being able to make a choice. If you've got a choice, that's incredibly powerful. It doesn't mean that what you're doing and what you've been doing all your life is wrong. You might choose, having got the awareness, the understanding, and looked at all the possibilities, you might choose to continue doing that. And that's absolutely okay. That's absolutely okay. But at least it's a conscious, intentional choice. And that's empowering the human. That's empowering our client to make those choices rather than just being swept along by instinct or being swept along by habitual patterns of behavior that they're not aware of and they can't challenge. So those helping and guiding our clients to make intentional choices is really, really important. And then reinforcing them, building them into habits using the usual practices, exercises, and reflections. So it becomes a habitualized choice. And then at a very high level, what I'm going to just do now, just in the last 5 minutes, is to just scamper through each of the types and look at what the Enneagram and can be used as a coaching tool. So for type ones, how can we offset a strong type one and make a type one a little bit more accessible by promoting self-compassion, by promoting self-acceptance, starting to break down and challenge that perfection is real? How can we get them to think about perfect imperfection, and can imperfection be perfect? Because perfection is unattainable. My definition of perfection is very, very different from, say, Nihar's definition, or Kalpana's definition of perfection, or Regina's definition of perfection. So everybody's got a different interpretation. So how can they be more open to exploring those perspectives? And that's a really big shift for them as a type 1 from a coaching perspective, and in terms of the perspectives they bring to the world. Type 2s, the coaching challenge here is starting to build self-awareness, starting to help them find their voice, starting to help them recognize their own needs and desires, rather than being this outward-facing, selfless giver all the time. How can they nurture themselves? What's the self-care routines? How can they look after their well-being, protect their boundaries, and start to establish some sort of self-compassion? So understanding that, bringing that to life, finding activities that bring them joy, focusing on themselves rather than how can they bring joy to others, is a really important focus for them. Type 3s are competitive achievers. How can we start to challenge them to shift from doing to being? And one of the things I say quite often is that at the end of the day, we're human beings, we're not human doings. So let's be something. Getting these competitive achievers, these high speed, permanent on hyperdrive, just to stop and self-reflect, to pause, just to slow things down, to look at a little bit of work-life integration, and to try and get in touch with their true selves a little bit more, and get that reconnection. So there's a great coaching challenge there for us as well. And keep in mind, this is just at the very highest level. This is just the basic dominant type. Never mind the mixes, never mind the interaction of the mixes, the instincts, the centers, and everything else. This is just the coaching tasks that you can do very, very quickly and very, very easily, focusing on that single dominant type. Type 4, they're all about fantasy. So getting them to ground a little bit more, getting them into mindfulness, starting to shift their focus a little bit into a more realistic world, letting them explore a range of emotions, letting them be a little bit more promoting in terms of self-acceptance, and starting to recognize and appreciate their uniqueness. Again, great coaching challenges and lots of practices that we can all think of in terms of how that can move them forward, how that can start their development, how can that nurture their growth using their core, their dominant Enneagram type as a platform. Type 5s, don't forget, these are the sort of intense creatives. These are the really super hyper focused, deep. Don't let the world disturb me. I just want to get on with what I do. How can we get them to connect with their bodies rather than just being in their heads all the time? How can we move them out of their heads into their bodies, talking about emotions, talking about sensations, talking about feelings? How can we begin to help them make social connection? So again, externalizing rather than allowing them to stay internal. Promoting curiosity, promoting experimentation, getting them to play with stuff, play with ideas, play with new thoughts, and engage with the world rather than engaging with themselves. 6s, which is our sort of super safe, the world is not a safe place. How can they begin to trust? Starting by trusting themselves and then moving outside of that later. But how can we begin to support them from a coaching point of view and move them into a more trusting space, building their self-confidence, looking for the opportunity to move forward? How can we begin to bring anxiety management techniques in, mindfulness, grounding, breath work? How can we bring those in to help them just settle into a space and be a little bit more comfortable with the world? 7s are monkey minds, mindfulness, slow them down, present moment awareness. How can we get them to really truly savor, not just appreciate, but savor their current experiences instead of going, that's great, next, that's great, next, and moving on so fast. How can we get them just to stop and settle? How can we explore from a coaching point of view what's behind that restlessness? Why? Why are they always in this constant drive for novelty and distraction and movement? How can we encourage them to stay on task, commitment and follow through, instead of starting something and then passing it off, starting something and then passing it off? Great coaching challenges. Our eights are super control freaks. How can they be more aware of how they're showing up? Notice moments when they're feeling this real compelling drive to be in control. How can we get them to pause at that point? Again, grounding, breath work. How can we get them to pause and just think whether there's a different way of doing this? Instead of leaping straight into that control, straight into that action, how can we stop? Deep breathing, mindfulness, meditation, just helping them move into a space where they're responding using the parasympathetic nervous system rather than reacting through the sympathetic nervous system. Again, if we know that they're a type 8, these are the kind of things that as coaches we can start to work with. And then our United Nations guys, peacekeepers, finding their voice. And it's difficult setting boundaries. It's difficult for these guys, but starting small, starting easy, starting with something very practical in terms of decision making, encouraging them that, for example, the example here, that when they go out to a restaurant and there's the usual debate around the menu, instead of saying, oh, I'll have whatever you're having, getting them to go, actually, what I'd really like is X, Y, or Z. Just starting small, starting easy, but starting just to push back some of those boundaries and hold their own boundaries and find their voice. Now, the other thing about the IEQ9 is that over and above all of those easy ones that we've just talked about, pretty much on every page, there's a development pathway box. So the one in the middle, 1, 2, 3, there's 5 different development exercises called out there. The next page, there's about 8 development exercises called out there. So in this report, and it's a 42-page report, 42 pages. In that report, it gives you a lot of how you can use this for coaching, how you can use this as a coaching tool, how you can work with this particular aspect for your clients. So the one in the middle that's circled is talking about blind spots. How can you begin to move that forward? So there's a ton of ideas in the report over and above all of the basic ones that we've talked about, and then picking up from the dashboard, looking at the different centers, looking at the instincts, looking at the profile mix, looking at the stress. All of those give you lots and lots of coaching opportunities. So working with that data in the context of your individual client gives you a huge amount of richness as a coaching tool. And I always like to end with a quote. You never understand a person until you consider things from his point of view, until you climb into his skin. That's a bit creepy, but hey, until you climb into his skin and walk around in it. And that's what the Enneagram helps you do. It helps you understand the person, helps you understand your client like never before, and really, really gives you, you could work with the Enneagram for 2, 3, 4 years with a client. There is that much richness buried in there. So play with it, enjoy it, have fun. I said at the start, my contact details are in the document. Anybody want to talk about the Enneagram? I can talk for hours. I've only got one, which is probably a good thing. Spare everybody and give everybody a bit of mercy. But what I'd like to do now is if anybody wants to hang around, we're bang on time, 21:30, but I'm quite happy to hang around for a little bit and take any questions.
Hi, Chris. I managed to join in a little late, but thank you
Hi,
for doing
Madhuri.
this for us. Thank you so much. A whole lot of world of Enneagram opened up, and briefly we were trying to place where are we? Where is my team? Where exactly would we be? One of those one of those types. But there are some questions for you on the chat, so just wanted to know if you would like us to read it out to you or
That would be a great help, actually. Yes. Then I, because I'm
so.
rubbish at reading and thinking. So
So Chaitanya, over to you.
Yes, yes, just a second. Oh, okay. So Hini is asking if is there a free resource to allow people to take the test in order to identify the type?
yes,
Choose
there you go. How about that for a short answer? Yes, there is. Sorry, I apologize. So the Enneagram Institute and the basic RETI, RHETI, the basic RETI is a free test. It takes 15 minutes plus or minus, but it gives you all it will give you is your dominant type. So it won't give you that profile mix. It won't give you anything else, but it will give you your dominant type. And you can start to then work with your client on that basis and start to unpack that. So that is free of charge, yes. IEQ9, which gives you the 42-page report, the all singing, all dancing, is actually ridiculously cheap, especially if you get a discount because you use it so much. So in Sing dollars, and I haven't got my currency calculator available, but in Sing dollars, it's 115 Sing. So 85.90 USD. So it's not that expensive, and you can build that into your. Oh, thank you, Madhuri. You can build that obviously into your coaching agreement and your coaching contracts.
So now we have another question by Anand. So he asked, what's the pointed specific use of identifying a type of coachee when we don't usually suggest and we evaluate of their suit, human beings versus human doings?
And then if you
I
want to
didn't quite
elaborate,
get
go
there.
ahead.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
please.
I know the question itself was pretty complicated, but Chris, am I audible?
Uh-huh.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, I mean, in fact, you have outlined how the awareness of all these tools and the personality types or the way we show up actually matters and how a coach works. But the one thing that is still sticking with me is that uh, while I'm not evaluating, I'm just being aware as a coach of the personality types. Or I mean, again, there's not a personality type; it's the way someone shows up. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but how am I going to really use this? And towards the end, you did explain that it's a suit which somebody is going to show up as. Now, if I'm evaluative as a coach and trying to observe those, I'm not saying I'm going to miss out the question, but am I not going to be judgmental, evaluative, and conditioned based on all these ways they're showing up to me? And then I'd be coaching those ways rather than the person, right? So I'm a
So,
little mixed up on that, like you can see the
no,
question also.
I think so. I think that's, and I understand the question, Alan. And thank you for bringing that, because it goes to one of the fundamentals of coaching for me, that we always meet the client where they are, and we're coaching the person, not the problem. You know all the sound bites. You all know all the sound bites. So all it does is it gives you some cues and clues. There are never any answers in coaching. It's subjective, it's soft, it's malleable, it's fluid. It depends on the time of day, lots and lots of depends. But it gives you some cues and clues. It gives you some things to explore, some hooks to just play with, to, as part of your intake, as part of your conversations, to unpack and understand whether this is something that you experience. Is this a perspective that other people have played back to you? So it's just giving you, at the lightest touch, it gives you a cheat sheet to explore it doesn't tell you, because right at the start, remember I said I don't want labeling, I don't want people putting in boxes. It just gives you something to explore, a conversation starter to then play with and to just unpack and see. You've got a little bit of a cheat sheet, so how can that help you amplify your coaching and make it more incisive and make it deeper and richer and more meaningful? It's not going to give you the answer, because it shouldn't stick a label on somebody. Absolutely not. And that's a really, really important point from my point of view.
Thank you. And while you said that, yeah, correct, not a cheat sheet, but we're only coaching them on what they're showing up as. It could also be my suit of, for now I'm identifying it this way, the considerate helper and the strict perfectionist combi of the coach that's trying to show up, right? So yeah, just being aware of that. Thanks, Chris.
Absolutely. Being aware of your own biases, being aware of your own judgments, your subjectivity. Those are what we always have to do. And my other encouragement in that space, Anand, is as we all try to do, is in post-conversation self-reflection. Did I walk into that trap? Did I form a judgment? Did I carry bias? Or was I able to be aware of that and suspend that and hold the client beautifully and softly in a way that I always aspire to?
Thank you.
So that self-reflection is really important.
Thank you. That really helps, Chris. Thanks a lot.
A pleasure.
So those are the only questions that I could see as of now on the chat box. Yes.
Okay.
Faria has something.
So what I'm going to do is say that anybody else that's left in the room. Oh, we're sorry. I'm gonna Faria. You've got your hand up.
I did. Thank you, Chris. Such a lovely session, and you did really well to keep on track, because I would have. There's so much there. There was so much there. I wanted to kind of like stay on another half hour, an hour at least. But yeah, I was just curious, actually, Chris. Have you ever had someone do the test and they've come up as one type, and when you've kind of delved into it, and they're kind of in denial about it, and they don't kind of see, and then you've had to kind of stop in your tracks and kind of go to plan B?
Yep. Absolutely right, and that does happen. It's not usually. So there are times when you get cross typing. So, for example, a 2 and a 9. So they're both very helpful, nice, compliant, soft, supportive people. So the 2 and the 9 sometimes get mistyped. For example, the 1 and the 8 sometimes get mistyped because it's all about control and perfection and rigidity. And that top end of the window of tolerance. So there's times when there is mistyping. You're absolutely right. There's also times, every time, there will be, sweeping generalization, and I apologize for that. But if I give a client an IEQ 9 report and they go through it, the probability is that they will turn around and say to me, 70% of it, spot on, absolutely, no question. In conversation and interpretation and working with them over the next couple of hours, they will get, yeah, okay, oh, yes. They're not necessarily comfortable with what they're reading, but that denial will go away and they will start to accept that actually, yeah, you've turned the lights on and you've caught me. That leaves still 10%. 10%. Now, those 10%, and so if I turn the torch on myself rather than talking about any of my clients, when I did my report, 70%, I looked at it and went, yep, that's cool. You got me. 20% was like, oh, I don't really want to admit that, but oh, yeah, okay, I know. It's true. And then there was 10% where it was like, no way, that's not me. Absolutely not me. I then gave the report to my wife to read. She nearly ended up in hospital, the poor girl, with whiplash. Like, yes, this is you. It's like, oh, come on. So there's that big chunk of blind spots that we
Yeah.
just don't see. We really, really don't see, but others experience. Others experience it all the time, and we don't see it. And that's a really, really powerful space to be coaching in, is just
Yeah.
opening that up, helping to boost your self-awareness and understand how people experience you.
Yeah.
So that's you're absolutely right. There's always, almost always, that final mile of just hard denial. Sometimes, there's 5% that is wrong. It's never perfect. It's never perfect, but it genuinely, IQ9 is just ridiculously accurate.
Amazing, amazing. And I love that analogy you gave with the wardrobe about picking out bits which suit you in, different contexts. It's, yeah, amazing. Thank you so much, Chris. Lovely session as
Great
always.
pleasure.
Thank you.
A great pleasure. And genuinely, if you want to chat more about it, you've got my contact details. Not a problem.
Will do. Thank you.
There is something we missed earlier. I think there is something about
Yes.
Lumia.
How do you come?
Oh, okay. Go ahead. Go ahead, Chaitanya.
I'm sorry. So I just saw this question over here. How do you compare this assessment to other assessments like TISC, DISC, and Myers-Briggs?
For me, I less on an individual basis, but certainly in a corporate setting, I get this question a lot particularly from HR. And there will be, but we always use MBTI, or we always use strengths, or we always use what, and that's fine. That's okay. You want to use that? Not a problem. In my experience and in my view, the Enneagram provides something that is richer, more sustainable, more long-lasting. It deals with instincts rather than a snapshot of how you think you are. People work with the IEQ9 report for 4, 5, 6 years. I've got clients that literally keep it on their desk, and every couple of days they'll dig in and find something new. So there's that sustainability component, that's an enduring component to it. There's so much richness, there's so much depth, there's always something new in there, which DISC, MBTI, strengths is probably my number 2 assessment tool. So I'm not going to be too mean about gout strengths. But in general, I just find the richness and the detail and the nuances of IEQ9 and the Enneagram overall gives us a lot more capability, tools, cues, clues, back to Anand's cheat sheet. When it comes to coaching, it gives us so much more insight, and it gives the client so much more insight as well. So I hope that answers. I mean, yes. DISC, MBTI, they have their role. They absolutely have their role. If you want a snapshot, a Polaroid, if you want a movie, IEQ9. I'm not sure that analogy works, but it's too late now. It's out the door. Any other questions where you just want to pop up?
Madhuri,
no? Oh.
You're on mute, Madhuri.
I'm sorry. No, I don't see anything else popping up. I mean, the people are calling it an insightful session. And there is one which I missed about Lumina. Ajit, do you want to come on mic and speak about it?
I mean, thank you, Madhuri. As I was listening to that, I was just comparing because I'm a Lumina practitioner, and I could see a lot of comparison in the archetypes, in the color schema and all of that, Chris. So I was just reflecting on somebody who asked a question and saying it sounds very much like Lumina.
Ah, right. It's not a platform that I'm aware of, to be honest. But I will go and do my homework.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the wonderful session.
A great pleasure. It's always a pleasure, and I love these sessions. So, but thank you for joining it.
I'm very aware of time, Chris. I know it's very late for you. So thank you so much for staying up and doing this for the coaching community. Coach to Transformation has these webinars, and you've been incredibly generous by coming in and helping us to for the community to learn something new. Chaitanya, over to you to close off.
Thank you so much, Chris. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining and making this session very interactive and engaging.
I would like to ask one more question.
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, Chris, I would like to ask you, do we need to be certified?
Technically, no. So it's a good question, Karen. But technically, no, you don't. Anybody can access IEQ 9. The one thing I would say is, and maybe this is a reflection on my lack of capability rather than anything else, it's taken me 3 or 4 years to get a decent feel for how to work with IEQ 9 and my clients.
Yes.
So it's deep, it's complex, it's layered, it's nuanced. So it does take work. But what I would say, Karen, is, and this is from me personally, not necessarily CTT, that if you wanted to work with a client using IEQ 9, I would be comfortable to partner with you and do the Enneagram work, and then you take over and do the coaching work. There'll be a very clear boundary in terms of this is your client, not mine. So there's no poaching or anything like that. I would be a supplier, a support to your coaching, and do the Enneagram work with you and for you if you wanted to.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
My pleasure, Karen.
Thank
you, folks. That's it. That's all from all of us at Coach to Transformation. Greatly appreciate these Tuesday learning sessions that we have. Please continue.